Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name's Sean and I am so glad you're here as always. Today we're looking at a great, in my opinion, budget-friendly knife from Steel Will, and that is the Intrigue in the mini size. So whether you want to call it the Intrigue Mini or the Mini Intrigue, I've seen it marketed in both ways. This is it, and I think it's fantastic. So I'm going to give you some brief specs, and I'll do some size comparisons as well. And then just give you my overall thoughts. I've been carrying this for probably 7 or 8 days at this point, pretty much every day, and kind of going out of my way to use it as much as possible so that I could give a fair and thorough review. And I've not touched up the edge other than one stropping that I did after about 5 days, I would say. So that's a little bit of background. Let's get into the basic specs. So well, first and foremost, the Intrigue comes in a full-size version and a mini. This is the mini that I'm talking about specifically, so just bear that in mind. If you like a bit larger of a knife, they do offer a larger size. You're going to pay about $38 for this knife, whether it's on a dealer website or Amazon. Generally speaking, 38 bucks is going to get you a mini Intrigue. The overall length is 7.5 inches, which is right in my wheelhouse. The blade length is 3.25 inches. Also right in my wheelhouse. It's plenty lightweight. It's just over 2 ounces, like 2.2, somewhere in there. And so let's kind of start at the business end and work our way back. So the blade we're looking at here is going to be D2 steel, which we can see marked here on the blade itself. That is the model number, the F45M. And it is a drop point, and it's nice and slender. It's not a tall blade, so a really good slicer. It is a hollow grind and a satin finish, and I just really like the blade shape quite a bit. My only complaint with the blade, to be honest with you, is, and I mentioned this on Facebook in a Facebook group, Steel Will, I think, brands, or I should say over brands their knives, in that I wish they would just put the Steel Will logo like up here in this flat area and just get rid of the actual text and just make it a cleaner presentation. And then on this side, like, I know it's called the Intrigue. I bought the knife. I don't need to see the model name in that large of a print. So I just don't like that it's that much branding and billboarding, because it's just a really attractive blade shape, and I think that takes away from it, frankly. In addition, the way Steel Will does their lettering, you can feel it. It's clearly above the surface. It's not etched in there flush. So that's my only complaint, honestly, with this knife is only that. It's a small nitpick, but just something I thought I'd point out. Again, my preference, yours may vary. I mentioned it's a hollow grind and a fully plain edge. They do not, to my understanding, offer this in any sort of partially serrated version, but that is what we're looking at there. The handle width is going to be about 1/2 inch, a little less on the width of the handle there. And it does have some really attractive blue barrel spacers, which I think contrast with the gray handle quite nicely. And we'll kind of work our way that way, but just thought I'd point that out. The pivot here is going to be running on bronze washers, so no bearings or anything like that, but it does have a good action, which we will touch on as always. So yeah, blade-wise, the shape, the steel, the overall design, the length, all good things for me and my taste. Really like the blade. So let's talk about the handle. So the handle is going to be a fiberglass reinforced nylon, and this is very typical with the budget lines from Steel Will. Here's a cut jack mini, same basic pattern there with the handle scales, and I have no problem with that at this price point. I'm perfectly happy with the FRN handles. They're comfortable. There's enough texture to be functional, but it's not overly aggressive, so no complaints as far as the handle material. The handle length is 4.25 inches. So in contrast to the blade, and I'll measure the blade here. So from tip to handle, we've got 1, 2, 3 1/4 of an inch, and then 4 1/4 on the handle. And I think the proportions are really nice. It feels like you're getting a good size handle. I have, I wear extra large gloves, but I can still get 4 fingers on the handle. And the blade proportion, I just think it looks proper, right? It doesn't feel too heavy on the handle side or too heavy on the blade side. I think it's just a well-designed proportion, so I do like that quite a bit. The locking mechanism is going to be a liner lock, and the opening or deployment method is going to be a flipper. As I mentioned, it runs on bronze washers. It's plenty smooth and it flips quite nicely. The detent on this I really do like quite a bit. So with, no wrist flick, just kind of moderate pressure, it comes right out every time. No complaints, and never have had any complaints with Steel Will and the overall action of their knives. Same thing with the Cutjack series. I've just always really liked these. They've always performed very well for me, and that's the same with the Mini Intrigue. So the action I like. It's plenty smooth. You don't feel any grit as you're closing it. It does run quite smooth, and I have not had any misfires. The flipping action's great, so no complaints there. The flipper tab itself is perfectly fine. It's jimped. It sticks out maybe a little further than some would like, but it hasn't been an issue for me. And the jimping is just aggressive enough that it kind of wants to grab your finger, and so you definitely get a good purchase. And just to give you an example, I'm going to use just my fingernail, literally the nail itself, in that last little bit of jimping to flip this, and it comes out just fine, right? And that's the detent really doing all the work. I'm not able to put much pressure with just one fingernail, but the detent is in such a way that, and you'll see and hear this, you hear it suck in. It's just got a really well done detent. So I do like that quite a bit. You guys know I'm kind of a detent guy. It's one of the things about a knife that I care about quite a bit, actually. And the detent on this is kind of right in my sweet spot. The liner lock is perfectly acceptable for a knife of this size. The lockup is good. It's at about 30%, and it is crazy strong up and down, zero blade play. With a knife this slim and long, if I try hard enough, as always, I can make side-to-side play. It concerns me not one bit. Up and down, it is solid as a rock. And so no issues there. Quite easy to get in and disengage that liner lock. It does kind of sit proud of the handle scales just enough that when I come in there, along with the texturing that it has on it, when I come in there with my thumb, it's just naturally going to disengage and very easy to close. The centering on my example is dead center, and this is after about, like I said, several days of consistent carry. So happy with the lockup, happy with the centering. The pocket clip is going to be right or left-handed carry, tip up, which is great. This is a perfect knife for a lefty, right? Being a flipper, that's terrible because I'm not left-handed, but being a flipper and having the reversible pocket clip is phenomenal for you left-handed users. It's not my favorite clip in the world as far as its design, just the way it looks. I'm not crazy about it, but what I do really like, and this is kind of one of those small attentions to detail that I notice, is if you look at the shape of the pocket clip and the shape of the handle scale, they really got this thing up as high as they could. Could they have put a deep carry loop over clip? Sure, they absolutely could have. But with what they did provide, they put it up just as high as they possibly could, and I appreciate that. So it's going to ride as deep as a pocket clip like this could ride, with maybe a half an inch sticking out, and that's been a non-issue for me. So I'm totally fine with the pocket clip. The overall fit and finish is good. I mean, you've got a little bit of jimping on the spine of the blade, which is very functional actually. If we look at the jimping a little more closely, the valleys are just deep enough, and the peaks are not crazy sharp, so you get a good purchase on that. And with my extra large hands, it just, I don't know, it kind of melts in there. There's no hot spots for me at all. It just feels right in my hand. It feels right, and it's a crazy good slicer. This thing was wicked sharp out of the box. And I've noticed that with a number of D2 steel blades that I've gotten from some Chinese companies lately, is they're just coming crazy sharp out of the box. So let me do a quick cut test. As I mentioned, I carried this for a number of days. Use it for just general EDC stuff, a little bit of food prep, opening packages, all the usual stuff, right? I stropped it about 5 days in. So for the last probably 3 days or so, I haven't done anything to it. And let's see how the edge has held up. I mean, this thing is still, I mean, it's just a razor. It's insanely sharp. Insanely sharp. Let's do a kind of a slow push cut. And it's really like from the hilt all the way to the tip. I mean, it's just the grind that they did on this thing. I mean, just using the very tip, it just wants to slice just cleanly every time. So the overall sharpness on this D2 from Steel Will really impressed me. And again, this is after 8 days of use and 1 stropping. It's wicked sharp. It is wicked, wicked sharp. I could probably shave with this. Let's try. All right. Sorry about the camera bump. Do we have any hair that we can shave? Try to find some that we can focus on. Focus. Okay. Let's see if we can shave some hair, if it'll focus. All right. Let's go. Come on, focus. Come on. All right. Let's see if this works. So we kind of lost our focus there, but the hair is gone, and there's some of it. So it will shave hair, just crazy sharp. I was impressed. So good on you, Steel Will, with your factory edge. I don't know if that's going to be typical of every single example, but mine came crazy sharp out of the box, and it's maintained that edge quite nicely. I did mention this earlier, but the barrel spacers being blue, I think is just a really nice accent to the kind of this light gray, wolf gray, urban gray, whatever you want to call it. I think they just call it gray. They do also offer this in a black FRN handle. And on the black version, the barrel spacers are going to be red, which would also be a really cool looking combination. It's just enough to give it a little bit of pop without being overly obnoxious, so I do like that. So let's get some size comparisons real quick, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So let's bring in, well, let's just go ahead with another Steel Will. Here's the mini cut jack, and if we line them up tip to tip, you'll see that the mini Intrigue is going to be about a ½ inch longer than the mini cut jack. And then let's look at a kind of similar knife in terms of maybe its usage, and that would be a Kershaw Leek. And tip to tip, the Intrigue is again going to be about a ½ inch longer. So these two knives here have almost an identical overall length, but the Intrigue and the Leek are definitely much more similar in their overall style. And then just for fun, we'll bring in the Para 3, tip to tip. These are pretty close in overall length, maybe 1/4 inch longer on the Intrigue, but obviously a much more slender, narrow, precise blade, which I just really, really like quite a lot. It does taper, and it's actually a decent blade stock. It's not super thin, but it does taper to a nice acute point, which I like. So overall, I think the design is a win. The size for me is a win. I may check out the full size just to kind of see what that's all about, but I'm really digging this knife. And just this kind of line from Steel Will in general, kind of the more budget-friendly line, which would include things like the Cutjack series, the Modus, things like that. And some of these you can get in premium versions with M390 and G10, but if you want to spend like $40 between the Modus, the Cutjack, and the Intrigue, you've got some good options. And then you've got kind of your next tier up would be like the Lanner and the Piercer, and then again your premium versions go up from there. But for $38 to get some good D2 steel, some really, I think, excellent D2 steel actually, and a really nice design and aesthetic, something that carries well, that functions well, I think is a great deal. And I think $38 is a no-brainer for this knife. So I will probably go ahead and pick up the other one in black with the red barrel spacers just because I'm me and I do that sometimes. But I love this knife. Highly, highly, highly recommend it, as I do the Cutjack. I did a full review on the Cutjack series not too long ago, And I'm just digging on this kind of budget series from Steel Will. This is by no means a new knife. It's been around for quite a while, but this particular model is new to me, and I thought I'd share my experiences, so that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate it so much, and I will talk to you soon.